Hey, we are live. Hi guys, welcome to another session of Rosex Maps. This is kind of a bittersweet moment for me. This is both my first session with a special guest who is not Eric, I suppose, and also my last session with Elections Daily. It's an amicable parting, and they're going to be helping me set up as an independent streamer on my own time. So, it's not all bad. As one door closes, another door opens, as they say. So, welcome to Rosex Maps. As I promised last time, I have my slogans. My dino, my rhino, there's the rhino, and as always, Walter, the adorable albino tiger. So, today I'm interviewing a very good friend of mine. I met him at the 2018 Montgomery County Agricultural Fair way back in the previous campaign cycle. He's a very good friend of mine. He is running for Senate. I'm very proud to have met him. I brought him in to speak to my school with a panel of 3 other conservative Republicans and libertarians to get some word out, and also just because it's good that people get exposed to alternate viewpoints. I stayed in touch with him. I worked on his 2018 campaign for a little while as an intern, and unfortunately he lost, but he outperformed expectations. And he has remained a good friend of mine. So when I was thinking, who do I want for a good send-off, I thought I would reach out to him. So welcome to my first interview. Please welcome a professor of political science at Towson University, Dr. Tony Campbell. Because this isn't live, we're going to do this fake stuff. Also give me some opportunity to show off my beautiful, beautiful pride bracelet that a good friend of mine made for me. Thank you, Nicole, very much. This is Professor Campbell. Very good friend of mine. He's a wonderful person. He was at the GOP booth at the Ag Fair where I met him. We've kept in touch since then, and I thought he'd be the perfect person to send me off. Goodbye to Elections Daily. It's been a roller coaster this past month. It's been great being with you. It's been great that you guys have had me, and it's been even more great that you guys are helping me establish my own place where I can do my own thing. But now, without further ado, let us get into it. Professor Campbell, I saw you with before I add you to the stream. I saw you had your beautiful. I assume that's your daughter near you.
Yes, that's my 7-year-old going on whatever she's going on. I haven't figured that out yet, but she keeps me on my toes, and it's a good thing.
Yes. Professor Campbell, move your hands for a second. I see you have a Ravens shirt on.
Yeah.
Professor Campbell, as you may not know, is not just teacher at Towson, but lives around there in the Baltimore area. So he follows the inferior football team. Not that I personally have any opinions. I actually don't like football in any way. But being from the DC area, I believe I am forced to appreciate the Washington team to be named shortly, or the team formerly known as the Redskins.
Right. Sort of like the Washington is like the Prince symbol now. You may be too young to remember that tab.
I do, actually. I didn't remember it, but I have heard of it.
Yeah.
Didn't he eventually became known as Prince again? Like it was
Prince.
He did.
He did after a while. Yeah. He had a contract dispute or something along those lines as far as royalties, and he decided to just change his name to a symbol. So I guess maybe that's what the Washington that was formerly named.
Well, perhaps the Washington football team will be following the path that Prince did, because a couple days before that the announcement was made public, an aspiring person in, I believe, the Virginia area actually bought up 20 some different trademarks that were all thought of as different replacement team names. For example, the Red Hawks is now taken. The Red Tails is taken. The Warriors is taken.
Right.
So the Washington football team is going to be having a hard time finding a good team name, and they may or may not end up just going back to the Redskins. I don't know.
Dan Snyder has a lot of disposable money that he doesn't use very well, so I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, with those players he hires and fires and the coaches, I don't know much about it, but I know I read the sports page, and I know I may not follow football, but I know how bad the coaches have been. So now that we've done the small talk, Professor Campbell, let's start with who are you? So we all know you ran, or actually you don't. To the viewers, Professor Campbell was the Republican nominee for Senate, from Maryland Senate, in the 2018 elections, where he finished with approximately 30% of the vote, outperforming expectations by about 2 to 3% in a D plus 15 state in the midst of an enormous blue wave. He emerged out of the field of out of a double-digit field, more than 10 people, with a commanding plurality of almost a third of the votes. And he instantly went on to become beloved by the Maryland GOP and the few people who I talked to in my area and convinced to switch their votes, all maybe 5 of them. So, Professor Campbell, who are you? Do you have anything to say about yourself, your background, your qualifications, things you like, your family?
That's a pretty broad question.
All right, let's go on further. What's your family?
Yeah, here's. I think what I would say about myself is that I'm a lifelong learner. I mean, I teach, but I still enjoy finding out new things. So this has been a lifelong journey. So grew up in Western Pennsylvania. So originally a Steelers fan.
My father actually. Where did you grow up? What town? Like what area?
Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania.
That's pretty close. My dad grew up in Washington, Pennsylvania. That's really close.
Yeah, about an hour or so away. So growing up there, there were no Republicans. There were conservative Democrats that would be Republicans today. Folks that were pro-life, pro-Second Amendment. Those
military, pro-gun.
Those kind of steel worker conservative Democrats, right? So and that's how I grew up in that family, church going, and all that other stuff. Yes, dear. I'm doing this now.
Oh.
What do you need?
I just wanted to show you. I was cleaning the edge of the coffee table.
Yes.
Look how dirty it is.
Wow. Thank you. Can you clean some more?
Yes.
Thank you.
I assume to the viewers that would be Tony Campbell's wonderful family.
That's my daughter Amelia. She was telling me she was cleaning part of the. I guess I'm saying this to the blogosphere now, or the.
All 300 of my followers. So
right, all the
it's
followers.
not going to go far.
I have a coffee table in my living room that she cleaned with a Q-tip, and she apparently thinks it's gross. So there you go.
Well, you should be lucky. My 13-year-old sister doesn't even bother to clean. So I'd say cleaning poorly is better than not cleaning at all. Your daughter, from what I've heard of her, sounds like a wonderful person. You're lucky to have her.
So going back to
your upbringing in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Western Pennsylvania. Moved here after I got out of the Army the first time. Moved here in '86, and actually the second time I moved here was in '96 after I graduated from Pitt. And
can you repeat that? I couldn't hear that. Pitt.
University of Pittsburgh.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear it was Pitt or Penn. My hearing isn't the best. Thank you.
So when I moved here, I ran a campaign for a guy named Ken Montague, who was a state delegate. He was in Ehrlich's administration for juvenile justice, and he was a Democratic delegate, and I was still a Democrat at the time, and I ran his campaign for Congress when Kwesi Mfume first left Congress to go run the NAACP. This was in.
We will be talking about him. Don't you worry.
So this is '97. This is '97-ish. And I ran Ken's campaign, and the thing I realized very quickly was how
primary challenge.
Yeah, it was a primary for the Democrat nomination in the 7th congressional district. And the thing I realized very quickly was how much the Democrat Party took the African American vote for granted. They just expected that block of votes to go their way, and didn't. There was no talk about issues. There was no talk about what elected officials are going to do to make people's lives better. It was vote for me because I'm your friend. Vote for me
because I'm not the other guy. Because I'm not
the other Democrat. Because because I'm better than he is or she is or whatever. And so that's why Elijah Cummings won that race, because he had more money. He had more of the insider play as far as being the Speaker Pro Tem of the Maryland House. And so he won that primary and wound up being in Congress until he passed away, right? So at that point, I realized that I couldn't be a Democrat in Maryland.
That was 1997?
That was 1997. So 20 something odd years later, I'm still Republican.
All this is before I was born, by the way. So this is ancient history to me.
Right.
Like Kwesi Mafume, who the heck is that guy?
Right. So
I know.
history tends to repeat itself, right? So of course, Cummings passes away last year, and Kwesi decides to dust off his congressional lapel button and run for Congress again, and now he's the congressman again. In a district that hasn't changed very much in the 20
both physically in shape and in the racial makeup and political makeup of its voters.
Politically, the faces have changed, but
not the ideas, not the party machines.
Right. Party machines.
Actually, before we continue, I just want to say that Elijah Cummings, who I know I disagreed with virulently on many issues, but he was absolutely I don't think he was the best representative, but from what I've heard and from what people who know him heard, he was a wonderful person, a loving family man, a very, very, very nice individual to meet. And I just like to say that, I'm a Republican. Professor Campbell was a Republican. I miss Elijah Cummings. I don't think anybody deserves to die, especially not a man like him. From what I heard, he was a hero. Many Republicans supported him, even in 2018 in this hyper-polarized time. That speaks to what kind of a person he is. So I believe he was in Congress for 20 years. So let's have 20 seconds of silence for him in the stream, and hopefully those silence won't get edited out. Rest in peace, former Congressman Cummings. You will be missed. Now, Professor Campbell, I'm sorry to have cut you off. Please continue.
So basically, that's the path. That's how I decided to become a Republican. There's most of it's been good. Some of it's not been good, but that's life. I believe that the Republican Party overall has the message that America needs to hear more, as far as freedom, liberty, equality, all the things that we talk about as Republicans. But unfortunately, we don't do a very good job communicating that stuff in a real world sense of what that means for people's lives.
I was piggybacking on what Professor Campbell was saying. I was when I was registering to vote last week, I talked to Scott Pressler, whom you guys might have heard of. He is a Republican, a gay man. He supports President Trump. I don't support President Trump. He still registered me to vote. He's registered Democrats, Republicans, everybody. And when I was talking to him, he said that he was going in Baltimore a couple months back, registering people to vote and for a cleanup. And for some of the people there, he was the first Republican they had ever seen. All they knew about Republicans were what Democrats had told them. And he told me that this is a problem, that if we want to win black votes, we can't just say, this is our platform for black people in America. Here's what we want. We have to go into black communities and tell them what we want to do, not just speak to white people and try and say, white suburban moms, this is why we aren't racist. We have to talk to black people. Professor Campbell, would you agree with this? Was there anything you care to elaborate on?
I would disagree with it a little bit because different, again, before
welcome to disagree, right? I mean, I didn't have you on to a rubber stamp everything I said.
So in 1999, I ran against Sheila Dixon, former mayor, for city council president.
Corruption. Wasn't she indicted for like a bunch of things?
Oh yeah. But it's Baltimore. Come on. So ran against her for city council president in 1999. Talked about the issues that are still there today. The fact that their schools have been failing generations of kids, public safety, infrastructure, economic development, job creation, entrepreneurship. Been talking about the same things in 1999 as we talk about today. So it's not that Republicans haven't been in Baltimore City. The question is, does the Republican Party, does the organization of the party support candidates that are in the city? Okay, we've had candidates in the city every cycle since then, since 1999. People that I thought were pretty competent and would have done a much better job than the alternative But when the party doesn't choose to spend any resources in those areas because they look at the metrics, they look at the numbers, and they figure, well, we can't win, so why are we going to spend any money there? Then you're going to get 18, 20%, 22% in those districts, right? Because you're not spending any resources there. So the way I would tend to think about it is that in order for us to, look, I used to be an Army chaplain, and I still do counseling and stuff like that. So, Scripture tells me that in order to reap a harvest, you got to sow seeds. You got to put seeds in the ground. You got to water them, and then the plants grow from there. But if you don't water the seeds, how do you expect to get any votes? How do you expect to get people to actually realize not only here's your ideas, but oh yeah, they're Republicans too. Now, the question is going to be in 2022,
especially after redistricting.
We've had Bob Ehrlich, and now we've had Larry Hogan for 2 terms, and I think Hogan got 36%-ish in Baltimore City last time.
In 2018 or in 2014?
What's that?
In 2018 or in 2014?
2018.
Yeah, he got a very high. I'll pull it up right now. I'll keep on talking.
Yeah, I think he got somewhere around 30, in the low 30s, maybe 33 to 36% in Baltimore City. If that is true, then the question then becomes
32%. 32%.
How do you use that seed, right? People went and voted for a guy who had an R beside their name for governor twice in Baltimore City, and he won pretty handedly the second time. I mean, the first time was kind of close. The second time he beat Jealous pretty well. So then how do you use that? How do you use that seed, right? Can you put resources in Baltimore City with good candidates running for city council or running for a delegate slot in Southwest Baltimore, maybe Canton, Fells Point, Lansdowne, kind of that area of Baltimore City, the southwest corridor, southwest.
So we draw viewers from across the U.S. So could you mind explaining the political geography of that southwest area? For example, racial makeup, partisan politics.
So while if you look at Baltimore as a map, kind of the west and east are predominantly African American, kind of the core of the city. The north of the city, pretty much the same way. Northwest, in the northwest corner, sort of like the Jewish enclave of Baltimore, the kind of lead into Pikesville, and then the southern areas, ones I'm talking about, they're white middle class, white blue collar, African American blue collar. And then that kind of leads to Baltimore County. So those are the areas that I'm talking about that could, I think the 47th legislative district is that in that area. That you can pull off a seat or two if you put resources there. But if you don't, then you're going to waste the 32% that Hogan got in 2018. So then instead of moving forward, you're backpedaling, because if you don't keep watering the seed, then the plant's going to die, right? That's
first thing I'd like to say about what Professor Campbell was saying is that because former Congressman Cummings recently died, there was a special election to hold his seat in April. After a crowded and divisive primary, as you mentioned, former Congressman Kwesi Mfume, who resigned his seat to lead the NAACP in the early 2000s. Decided for a comeback, handily dispatching people, including Democratic Party head Maya Rockeymoore Cummings, among others. And he ran against in the general Republican Kimberly Classic. This Classic got about 30% of the vote, a little less, if I remember correctly, and that's higher than any Republican had gotten in that district in almost a decade. That was overperforming not just like the blue baseline of 2020, where Democrats were up by about 10% in the polls, not just adding on to that the fact that Baltimore's 7th district Republicans are lucky if they get to 20%. Not just adding on to that Kwesi Mfume is still remembered very well and is still beloved by African Americans in the 7th district. but also that Mifune raised much more money, had more name recognition, and it was a higher turnout special election in a district comprised of Democrats, almost entirely. And Ms. Classic still, I'm not going to say she kept it close because she didn't. She got destroyed. But it was closer than at any time in years past. And the problem with what Mr. Professor Campbell was saying is that in today's world, the internet is everything. And we all know that the internet, our attention spans aren't exactly getting any longer. And so what I'd like to ask you is, how do you think we can go about this? How do you think the Republican Party can have the patience to plant the seeds now and, keep, it's not just planting the seeds because, we run our candidates, we run Miss Classics, we run Philanese Scotts, we run our Catalina Laus, we run Liz Matories, we run candidates there, but they lose. We don't, whether we give them money or not, they lose. And then Republicans give up. So how would you say that we both keep ourselves patient on getting those candidates while also trying to keep the money going to the currently competitive districts so we don't lose the House now? Or
well, I think the number that you put out as far as Kim Klacik is concerned is a
apologies,
that, right? Without Larry Hogan having 2 successful runs in Baltimore City, Kim Klacik doesn't get anywhere near the 30%. She doesn't. She gets 18%. She gets 16%. She gets, it's in the teens. I mean, that's what it is. That's what the baseline is, right? So now the baseline is higher because of Hogan in his 2 terms as governor. Now people are at least willing to, and instead of just saying, "Oh, you're a Republican, forget it." Now it's, "You're a Republican. Let me see what you want to say, and maybe I'll vote for you." Now you're not going to get 51%. You're not going to win the election, but at least you get people to pay attention to you. Now the question is, what do you say, right? I've talked to Kim Klacik a couple times, and I think that she's a good candidate. She's a telegenic candidate. She has the media presence to do the things that you would want a candidate to do. But I'm not sure she was ready to run for Congress. And I'm just telling you, I'm pretty straight up with people. I don't think that she.
Be honest. We don't want any our false presences. We don't want
had the experience to run for Congress, right? But that being said, she did plant another seed, right? Because it's not just about now Larry Hogan got 32%. Now someone who was totally unprepared, first time running, got 30% in the 7th congressional district. Now that if I'm a Democrat, I'm not exactly pleased by that because we should be crushing these people. We should be going 85-15.
It was 25%
should not be able to get
with a significant portion to conservative third-party candidates. So Congressman Mifune only got 73%. So she and conservatives got about 27%.
Right. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you, of course.
No, but
it's over the internet, so it's sometimes hard to hear when you're talking. So I apologize.
So it shouldn't even be that much, right? In the 7th congressional district, historically it hasn't been that. But again, Hogan's laid the trail of 32% showings in Baltimore City. I think the first time it was like 26 or something like that. Now it was 32 in 2018. So what do? We talk about issues that matters. And here's the thing that annoys me more than anything else. It seems to me that the Republican Party goes MIA when there's things to be talked about. So, for instance, Black Lives Matter, right? As an African American Republican, it makes no sense to me why the Republican Party does not champion some of that stuff, right? The fact of the matter,
do all of it. You don't need to support the Marxist platform called Black Lives Matter, but you do have to say that Black lives unequivocally matter. Every life matters, and you know what?
Right.
Black lives are part of every life. Black lives need to be. Obviously, I'm going to let you talk because you have more experience and more knowledge, obviously. But Black lives. Republicans need to not be worried about saying, they can't just say like, oh, every life matters. They have to go out there and saying every life matters, and that includes Black lives.
Right. Well, and here's the thing: if we're really about liberty, freedom, and justice, if that's what our party's about, and we know that compared to other groups, African Americans are the ones that have been left behind the most in the last 20 years.
Before that, too, last 30, 40, 50 years.
I guess what I'm talking about is in the last 20 years, and I tell this to my students all the time, the LGBTQ community, which you're a part of.
Oh, yeah, more ways than one. More ways than one.
They've made incredible strides in the last 20 years. Lawrence versus Texas was 2003.
But
right?
12 years later, we got Hodges versus Obergefell, or probably the other way around because I can never remember names. But 2015,
right?
Obergefell versus Hodges.
And so in 12 years ago, from sodomy being stricken from the books to having same-sex marriage, okay, 12 years. The African American community is still looking for civil rights from the 1980s. That's how bad it is. Look at Baltimore City and how jacked up that is. It's because that community, my community, people who look like me in Baltimore City, has been left behind for the last 30, 40 years. Right? Now, it's the only group in America that can say that. That's citizens. Now, we can have no discussion about whether someone's legal or illegal or undocumented, or if they're dreamers. That's another discussion. As far as folks who are American citizens, where are they on the spectrum of rights, liberties, and all that stuff? African Americans are still behind.
And actually, it goes back to what you said earlier. So in the 80s, President Ronald Reagan, he laid the seeds. He put forth programs that would get African Americans off of welfare and back in the workforce. The war on drugs, which didn't work out this way, unfortunately, but it was intended to reduce the drug presence in the inner cities. In 1994, when Newt Gingrich took over the House, Republicans ignored that, and they went back to not caring about African Americans. They went back to just appealing to their base. And all those gains that Reagan made, he didn't get any more black votes than any other Republican candidate, but he laid the groundwork for a generation of conservative African Americans that could have been maybe receptive to the Republican message. And then Gingrich arrives and wipes it right back to square one. Those seeds, they just got dug up and tossed into the garbage. That's exactly what you were talking about. I really like your metaphor, and I'm going to be using it from now on.
Well, both sides did it because, Clinton trying to win re-election after all that stuff went down with Monica and Whitewater and all that stuff, trying to win re-election, he signs the crime bill, right? And the crime bill puts millions of African Americans in jail for trumped up charges that we're still paying for the damages of that stuff from 20 years ago. So there's blame to be had, but I'm a Republican. I don't really, I know what the Democrats do. I'm disappointed in my party, the party that's supposed to be for liberty, freedom, and justice and equality, and all that stuff, and we don't even show up. We don't even want to talk about the issue. We punt it. We talk about kneeling for the flag and stuff like. You know what? If we talk about issues that people care about, that's going to impact their lives, then people are going to pay attention to us when it comes time for us to run for office. Other than that, we just talk and people don't care.
Talk a big game, but you fumble in the fourth quarter, and there was a recent Super Bowl, I believe. Where one of the teams had a rather large lead in the end of the game. I think the fourth quarter, and then they lost.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for the update, the cleaning update.
Well, Eric is going to be editing. Eric is going to be editing the stream, so we will edit that part out most likely.
Yes, okay.
If he doesn't, and I made him promise that I would get to sign off on the video before publishing, so I'll make sure that doesn't make it.
Okay.
So there was a recent Super Bowl where one of the teams was ahead by a lot, and I think the fourth quarter or something, and then they ended up losing. Now I don't remember anything of about it. It's a Super Bowl. I don't follow football. But it seems like what you're saying, you talk the big game, and then you don't show up, and you fumble it all away.
Right.
And that's really smart. And I think that's something that the GOP needs to focus on. So let's switch topics for a bit. You said that you were a military chaplain. How does that affect your political beliefs? How does that affect your decision to run for Senate, for example, or your Republican Party?
It It informs it. It doesn't change it. You know, I let me put it this way. As much as I believe that the founders of the republic knew what they were doing, and making sure that there are two avenues. Sorry, two avenues of what's the word? Two areas of responsibility, and it's, you know, what the church is supposed to do and what the state's supposed to do, right? And all the way back to, you know, Augustine wrote that there should be different governing bodies for both, right?
Before that, right? Like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give
Well, Jesus said the same thing, right? So the problem is, and especially this is the issue that I think Republicans have with the LGBTQ community. If you are LGBTQ and you're Republican, what you hear from our side is that we try to use government as a hammer to try to inform social norms, right? To then say that, you know, if I am a conservative Christian, if I have that theology, then I'm going to use government to make sure that I keep people from being gay.
That
right?
Everybody else that does what I want them to do, basically.
Right. So I want people to believe what I want them to believe. And the founders didn't want any parts of that. They understood how dangerous weaponized theology could be, right? Meaning, I'm going to use the power of the state to enforce my moral principles. What the law is supposed to do, or what the republic is supposed to do, is to make laws for people to be able to live well, not to micromanage people's morality. That's what your family's for. That's what your churches are for. That's what your belief system is supposed to be about. It's not the government's role to micromanage your morality. What we hope happens, or what I hope happens, is that your morality will then lead you to follow the rules, meaning to obey the law. That's what that should be. And so, as someone who understands the Constitution and the writings that came before it, I know what I expect from government. You know, and when I ran for U.S. Senate, I said this pretty clearly. I would never use government as a tool to try to enforce somebody else's morality.
I noticed that, and I liked it, and I ended up working for you, and it was a wonderful experience. And
Right.
I still wish you won. I knew you weren't going to, but, you know, I wish you had. It was a great time. You moved the conversation in a positive way in Maryland.
Right.
You know, to the viewers, Professor Campbell was in fact the first African American Senate nominee in the general election in Maryland's history, as far as I know.
Wait a minute, not yet. No, I'm the third.
Really, I apologize. See, I was wrong. Dang it.
Well, so let me. There's something else you probably don't know too. So there's been four people of color as Republican nominees for U.S. Senate. No Democrats.
In Maryland or everywhere?
In Maryland.
Oh, no, in Maryland probably.
In Maryland. What's the guy's name? Oh Lord. So the first one I think was Linda Chavez, Hispanic. She wound up being Secretary of something for, I think it was it might have been for Reagan, or Bush one, or HW. Linda Chavez,
Secretary of Labor from Bush one, and she was somewhere big in the Reagan administration. It doesn't say where.
So Linda Chavez was the first. The second one was a guy named Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes ran here, was the nominee, moved to Chicago, ran against Barack Obama in that Senate race. And
I thought you had the wrong name. I didn't know he ran in Maryland first. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then Michael Steele was the third, former lieutenant governor, and then I'm the fourth. So I just find it interesting in that conversation that there's been no people of color on the Democrat side has ever been a nominee.
Have there been any women Democrats running for Senate?
Or women, for that matter. So again, we talk about big tents, right? Big, inclusion, and I'll leave that alone. Yeah.
And
You were
at least
saying-
at least a while ago, not now anymore, but in 1988 and 1992, Maryland was a swing state. Now I don't know when these candidates ran, but certainly up until the early 2000s or the late 90s, it was very possible for a Republican to win in Maryland. None ended up winning, but it was certainly very possible. And we just never gave them any support. We never gave them institutional support. Not in the open races, not when there were unpopular incumbents, not at all. Not in 2018 when it was a one-termer. Wait, no, you ran against Cardin. I'm sorry, I was thinking 2016. Not in 2016 when it was Kathy Shaliga against a one-termer, Chris Van Hollen, who had done nothing for the state, nothing at all, and she didn't get any support. She only ran 1.2% ahead of Donald Trump. You got even less support and still outperformed expectations, but you ran behind Donald Trump. And as exactly what you're saying, none of the seeds were planted. You're right. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about with you was after the brutal murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and many other African Americans at the hands of police officers acting outside of their capabilities. The conversation, due to Twitter and other social medias, shifted in a direction of there are these people, they were killed, let's scream their names, let's get for change. Because of that, Senator Tim Scott and other Republican senators pushed for acts. I don't remember, I believe it was called the George Floyd Act. I doubt from what I was reading, and I'm probably wrong, but that's what I remember. But it was an act that would curb police brutality and establish more protections for African Americans under the law. Actually, Tim Scott, the senator, went up to Donald Trump and told him, I am African American. I've been affected by this. I want to lead the bill. Donald Trump said yes. And the Democrats, I'm not going to say why they did that because I don't know why. It was closed door meetings. But the Democrats ended up filibustering and then blocking the Senate bill from passing at all. And I'd like to ask you both, why do you think that the Democrats would do that when historically, for the past few years at least, the Democrats have been pushing for anti-hate crime bills? This time they blocked it. And secondly, what would you do if you were able to say make a First Step Act version 2? What would be in that bill? So firstly, why do you think the Democrats will block this bill when in the past they've been pushing for their own bills that do similar things?
Well, I think it's an election year. If that bill would have got passed, then Donald Trump would have been able to use that as, this is, not only am I helping out economically as far as having, historic numbers as far as African Americans and Hispanics as far as unemployment numbers before COVID-19. But now we under my leadership, I was able to pass, historic civil rights legislation that hasn't been done before, right? Democrats didn't want that at all. So I can, and the sad thing about it is that these areas that George Floyd and other folks are being killed are mostly Democrat areas that members of Congress, right?
So George Floyd, I'm probably wrong, and if so, I apologize. But from what I remember, George Floyd, he was in Minneapolis, if I remember correctly. Okay, I was right. Phew. That would have been very awkward if I had been talking about this and got it wrong. Anyway, we'll just edit that out. So George Floyd in Minneapolis, his U.S. representative was a Democrat, or is a Democrat, I should say. The mayor is a Democrat. Both senators, the governor are also Democrats. The city council are Democrats. The attorney general is a Democrat. The attorney general actually is a wife beater who famously posed with the Antifa handbook and said, "This is what we should be doing." In that famous picture. But anyway, so exactly, it's politics. They're treating Black lives like pawns to be pushed around on their chessboards. And I love chess. I play chess, but we don't play chess with lives. We play chess with chess pieces.
Well, but it's been that way for 40, 50 years easily. So let's leave that there for a second. So circling back to the second half of your question, I think Tim Scott's bill was excellent. I think it answered all the things that I would be interested in seeing. I think part of it, though, is we have to do. There seems to be a confluence of issues here. There's the fact that police officers are not really support it, and so you have a whole bunch of institutional memory that, first of all, is leaving. You have the old ones who maybe have some, let's say, biases and grudges and stuff like that.
You're welcome to be as blunt as you want.
So you see biases and grudges that they may have from their history of being on the force for decades, and then you have a crunch of trying to bring in new people, new recruits, new officers, who then are put in situations that, quite frankly, I've served twice in the as a army in the army, and I chose to do that rather than law enforcement. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement because I couldn't do that job. I tell you right now, I could not do that job. And I think that part of the issue is that there is a lot of stress. Maybe we need to do more, better training on this. And we need to do more, as people talk about community policing. And I think that there's part of that that's missing. Not necessarily the cops walking a beat and stuff like that, like they did in the 1950s and 60s or something like that, but developing relationships, right? And I think that doesn't happen as much anymore. Now, I may be totally wrong about this, and again, I'm not a police officer. I wouldn't want to do that job. I have the utmost respect for what they do, but it seems to me that there's a connection there that's missing between the community and law enforcement. Part of it, I think, and part of it may be trust itself, because you listen to. I mean, you're down in Montgomery County, but here in Baltimore, you listen to the newscasts every night. You don't know what to believe, because the police commissioner is saying something different from the mayor saying something from the city council president, and all these people are supposed to be your leaders.
At least in my experience, I don't live in Baltimore, but at least in my experience, when you hear something, the mayor is going to be lying. The Baltimore mayor is going to be either lying or is taking money from someone to lie. I would say, I would automatically, before I know anything about the situation, say, Mayor, you're lying. I believe literally anybody else. I don't even know who the mayor is right now.
Right, but the police, I guess the police commissioner though.
And I apologize for making it seem less serious than it is. So please continue. I apologize.
Yeah, but the police commissioner has got the FOP on one side, and he's got the community on the other side, right? And so he's got to try to deal with those dynamics too. And it's a very difficult job,
I read I don't remember where, so I can't credit this, unfortunately. I read that it would be a good idea for police officers to, as you said, engage in the community, but not just that, to for example, to bring donuts to the community, or to play music with people in the community, to do things that would say that it's not just they're above and they're taking young black people off of the streets and putting them in jails, that they're that they're there for those people in their worst times and in their best times. That
right.
That not everything needs to be solved with force.
Right.
I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that idea.
Well, I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, if your whole, I think it's psychology. If your whole relationship with someone is conflict, you're not going to want to be around that person, right? You're not going to want to have engagement if everything you do is like this, right? Every time you see that person, there's us versus them, and it doesn't go your way because you don't have the power in that situation. Why would you even want to engage? So I think that's understandable. And so that's why, like when Freddie Gray died 5 years ago in
Baltimore, right?
In Baltimore, I've always said that the riots that happened here wasn't about Freddie Gray. It was the match that lit the spark, right? Because that stuff was resentment and and anger and frustration of 30, 40, 50 years of just being messed around with, right? Not getting any real answers, not getting your schools stink. You have no public safety. Was it last year? It was almost almost one person per day was shot in Baltimore City, was killed in Baltimore City.
I did not know that. That is crazy.
And so when you can't even count on your neighbor, your block, your neighborhood to be safe, and you know that your schools are jacked up, and you know that you don't have any economic opportunity, it's no wonder that when someone gets killed in police custody, there goes the match, man. So it's a multi-layered issue. And so I think what we need to do as leaders, though, is at least have the conversation. And that's why I'm so annoyed by the Republican Party. We won't even have the conversation of saying, well, how can we work together to fix this? It's not about us versus them, Republicans versus Democrats, because, quite frankly, if we do our job, that's going to be worked out. People are going to figure out who the good people are.
Democrats are either going to have to get better or they'll lose the black votes.
Right. They're going to figure out who the good people are, who the bad people are. But if we don't even engage, then it's no wonder why Baltimore City hasn't elected Republicans since McKeldin, and that was in 1960, blah, blah, blah.
Before I was born.
Right. When I was born, right? It was like 1966 or something. It's no wonder. And we only have ourselves to blame as Republicans because, again, I really believe that African Americans have been they're the left behind group right now. So what do we do to deal with that? And the fact that we won't even engage in the overarching issues of Black Lives Matter is just ridiculous. So
as a party, there should be some nuance. We don't need to say we support the Marxist organization that calls itself Black Lives Matter, but we do need to say we support every single Black life. Black Lives Matter, the statements. And there's been an appalling lack of that from Republican leadership and from the Trump administration and Republicans in the Senate. And I completely agree with you. It's not just shameful personally and politically. It's not just horribly rude to African Americans. It's also wasting a golden opportunity as African Americans are getting more and more fed up with Democrats. Each generation of African Americans is less Democrat than the previous one, but they're not more likely to be Republicans. They're more likely to be independents because even though Democrats, African Americans are starting to see that Democrats have been failing them for decades, Republicans haven't been doing anything for them. They haven't even been trying. And so you see this, and a smart Republican Party or a caring Republican Party would take advantage of that and start pushing out more solutions for the African American community, for low-income Black and brown people. But they don't. They just don't.
Well, and the thing I'll say about, I have, and I've said this to my Republican friends. I support the president. I think he's going to win re-election. I don't think it's going to be close. I think it's going to get 300.
With what the polling says. Well, we'll get back to this then. We'll get back to this. So continue.
These will get 320 electoral votes. Because Biden has to win 3 of 5 states. He's got to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. He's got to win 3 of those 5 to have a chance of getting to 270. I don't see Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's done.
I'm gonna say that we're gonna come back to this because I personally think it's a little much too early, especially given the polling situation, to say that. But please continue, and we will come back to this later for the viewers.
And so but having said all that, and looking at it from my vantage point as far as how I read political tea leaves and the people that I know in Pennsylvania and Ohio, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, that is going to make the difference in this election. Donald Trump is a narcissist and he's an egotist.
Everybody can agree on that, no matter what party you are.
That's who he is. He's not a Republican. he sometimes acts as a conservative. I would consider him to be a populist, more in the line of Teddy Roosevelt than anything else, right? So, but he's also done more for the economic issues for African Americans than the last 3 or 4 presidents ever did, by far. Not even close.
I would say that. Oh, first of all, you're correct about that. But I would say, at least from my opinion, from my perspective, that all the things he's done have been kind of byproducts of policies designed to lift Rust Belt workers and driftless area workers that just simultaneously also worked for African American communities. Can you point to anything that he's done that's actually like been designed, besides the First Step Act, that's specifically designed to help Black people and not just, for example, all poor people?
So one thing I can point to is the HBCUs, fully funding them.
Oh, yeah, he has increased funding for them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Obama didn't do that.
So let's get to a much more positive note now that we've had about 20 minutes of talking about police brutality and the unfortunate circumstances of our inner city predominantly Black residents. Let's go on to something more positive. In the 2020 cycle, the Republican candidates for House across the country are more diverse than they have ever been. Our top tier recruits are looking more and more like America. They're not all white men. They're looking like America. We're funding African American, female, Latino, LGBT contenders. There's a real push with new political action committees like EPAC, Winning for Women, Susan B. Anthony list to fund women especially and African American voters and Latinos, and it's working. People who've won primaries, they're still almost completely white and male, but there is a significantly higher proportion of African Americans like Wesley Hunt, Hispanics like Mike Garcia, and women like, for example, actually Minnie Robinson lost. There've been like 50 women that have won their primary, and now that I'm speaking to the camera, I can't think of any of them, and this is completely embarrassing because I've been studying this for such a long time. So now what I'm gonna do is keep talking about how embarrassing it is, and my brain is gonna catch up. But you know what? Like there have been dozens upon dozens of women on their primaries. Even though I can't think of any, and this is really embarrassing on my part, you can look it up. There just factually have been. Beth Van Dyne, for example, in Texas.
Okay.
And so it's been more diverse than any election cycle. This is, at least in the Republican Party, by far. What do you think of that? Obviously, it's a good sign, but do you think it's a flash in the pan? Do you think it's something here to stay? What would you do to expand upon it?
I'll make 2 comments. 1, it's about time. 2, it's in direct response to Donald Trump being elected. What's that?
How so?
Well, look, if you're the Republican Party, you're being painted as a narcissistic, misogynist, racist. You got to put up candidates that can effectively communicate our ideology, who are good candidates and who can check off that box, right? And I think more importantly, there are more candidates of color who are comfortable running as Republicans.
And there's also the thing that we were talking about before we went live, how having one non-white candidate or one LGBT candidate can open the door for many more behind them in future generations to see this person. Like, for example, you inspired me to switch parties because I realized that the Republican Party does accept everybody. That's not just the home for old bigoted white men. And perhaps the same thing will affect change later. For example, Mia Love, the first female Black Republican ever. Now she was an awful campaigner, just objectively. But she was a great person, a great representative, and a lot of younger African Americans, people like, well, not more recent, I should say, people like Wesley Hunt, people like Kendall Qualls in Minnesota have mentioned her as saying that they see themselves in her in the Republican Party, and And so it's exactly what you're saying, that we need to start. It goes back to what you were saying half an hour ago about planting the seeds,
Right.
which I still love that metaphor, and I will be using it without attribution. By the way, I
That's
will
good.
steal your content.
That's right.
So
But the more having people of color be more comfortable. So, and going back to the city again, I think we have 12 or 14 candidates running for city council president, and mayor, which is unheard of, right? It's literally unheard of in Baltimore City. Last year, what's her name? Roxy. No, I'm gonna really mess up her last name. Nubaku, I think that's what her name is. First African American Republican elected in Bowie. She's a city council person right now. She's 30 years old, smart as a whip, and she's got a very bright future ahead of her. And she stepped out on faith and just ran her campaign. Got some support from the party, but now that seeing someone like Roxy, who is 30 years old, female, African American, city council person, I can't imagine the ripples. We were talking about this before we went on. I can't imagine the ripples of inspiration that she has when she goes out, even in her council district, across the state. How many young black kids or people, kids of color, she's going to be meeting over the next 2 or 3 years as a city council person? Are like, I can do that.
And not just that,
it's
but
just
I can
incredible.
do that as whatever party I want to be.
Right.
Maybe I'll be a Democrat, but
Right.
maybe I'll have the opportunity to be a Republican.
Yeah, and her, and being who she is, she's such it's just a shining person, that any young person can say, I can be in what's the word? I can be a change agent. I can do it.
I personally have,
and I can win. I can make a difference.
I personally have never met Mrs. How do you pronounce it? I'm so sorry. How do you pronounce it?
I messed it up. Her name. Vote for Roxy. Do a search. Roxy City Council, Bowie, Maryland, and she'll come up.
Mrs. Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. Mrs. Ndebumadu. I am so sorry, but
Yeah.
I have never met her. But if you're watching this, I would love to meet you. That would be awesome. Contact me. So anyway, now there's been a lot of polling showing that. Well, first of all, so we're gonna slowly make our way into how you can possibly think Donald Trump is favored, because I am very curious to hear this. So we'll slowly make our way. So let's start moving to polling. The current polling has Donald Trump losing to Joe Biden by enormous margins, 6, 7, 8, sometimes even 10 to 12%. However, when you dig into the crosstabs, those losses are among older people, they're among white people, they're among suburban white women in particular. President Trump has actually gained over his 2016 margin with African Americans by a small amount and Hispanics by a very large amount. However, there are still not that many of them in the swing states, and the fact that he's losing among white people, I mean, he's still winning white people, but he won, I think, 59-39 in 2016. That's 20%. He's up by single digits among white people right now. So it's counterbalanced. So I'm noticing that the Republican Party is becoming, it's still a majority white party, and that has to be changed and changed soon before we sink into irrelevance. But I'm noticing a huge uptick in support among Hispanics, among Asians, among blacks. And I'm wondering if you think that that's gonna do anything in the future. I'm wondering how you think we can best mobilize these people who tend to be younger, possibly prior non-voters, who tend to be more urban, to engage them in the future and to keep their votes, not just for 2020, but for 2024 and for 2044.
Well, what I said before, it's about planting a seed and being there. So let me shift gears, because projecting 20 years from now, that's something for a different segment of political science, and it's something that I don't necessarily do. So I would just be guesstimating, and I don't really want to do that. I think the question that maybe would be more interesting would be, why do I think Trump is going to win in 2020 with the
right? That actually would be a question I was planning on asking.
with the polling.
Donald Trump is getting crushed by Biden all over the polls. Why do you think he's going to win in 2020? Let's do it right out. Let's bite off the whole show.
Yeah. So the polling. So here's what happened in 2016. The polling was 7 to 8 points off because they didn't figure out something that they should have figured out, was that the folks out and voted for Bernie.
No, yeah, I guess the swing state polling was very far off.
Yeah,
national polling was pretty accurate.
Bernie Sanders and for Donald Trump, those folks hadn't voted in forever. And any polling model that you're doing that can't account for people who hadn't voted in 20 years is going to be way off. Okay, so we get to election night, and it's 8:40, and Hillary tweets out, Secretary Clinton tweets out, well, it was a no matter what happens tonight, I'm so proud of my team. We did such a great job, and I'm on channel
former secretary. Former secretary.
Yeah. So I'm on Channel 2 doing election night coverage, saying, well, if you're Secretary Clinton, former Secretary Clinton, you don't put out a tweet like that unless you know something, right?
Good or something bad.
And they knew it was over. They knew it was over at 8:30. Okay, so the reason why is because the polling was so off. And here's what I knew this back in September, that it was so off, because I drove through Western Pennsylvania. Bill Clinton owned Western Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh, Bill Clinton had that shut down. Okay, he made more trips into Pittsburgh than he did into Washington. Air Force One landed in at the Pittsburgh International Airport like 5-6 times a year because he loved it in Pittsburgh.
Were you still living in the Pittsburgh area at the time?
No. He just loved going there because he knew that.
Were you at the time of Bill Clinton?
Yes.
Were you still living there? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So, but in 2016, there were no Hillary Clinton signs to be seen. That told me right there that she didn't have any ground game, any interest. Basically, west of Harrisburg, it was totally Donald Trump, and it's going to be the same way in 2020.
I would say, now I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not agreeing with you either, but I'm not disagreeing. But let's play devil's advocate for a bit. Yard signs aren't exactly the best predictor of how people are going to vote. They're the best predictor of how engaged people are going to vote, of how politically active people are going to vote, of how excited people are to vote. But they're not exactly very good predictors of how people will end up voting in the end. So why do you think that in 2016 and by extension 2020 it's different?
Well, in 2020 it's going to be different because circling black to Black Lives Matter, and the statues being torn down, and the seismic shift of what it means to be American, right? And I think what's going to happen, this is just me, again, prognosticating, because that's what we do, political scientists do, is that when you have a shift like this, there's going to be a counterbalance. There always is a counterbalance. There's always a reaction to an action, right? With Newton's blah, blah, law of motion, is action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's going to happen. It happens in politics too, man, because people are going to be afraid of change. They're going to be afraid of this thing going way over here, and they're going to vote the way that they want to vote. They're not going to tell anybody they're going to vote for Trump, but those folks are going to get to that ballot box, and they're going to be white, and they're going to be afraid, and they're going to vote for the guy who talks about America first. The only thing Trump has to do is not screw up.
Well, that's going to be a problem. He screws up constantly.
But Joe Biden can't even get the African American base under him, because
I actually have a question. Speaking of the African American base, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. Recently, now this may be a joke, as fans of him know that he often says things and goes back on them a couple of days later. But famous rapper Kanye West recently tweeted that he will be running for president. Now I'm saying I don't think he's going to actually run. I think it's another publicity stunt. But if he ends up running, what do you think the effect is going to be? Is he going to pull more votes from Trump or Biden? Where? How? What demographics?
Okay, so you're probably asking the worst African American on the planet this question, because I don't pay attention to Kanye West. I never did. So
I know more about Kanye than you do. Gas.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Here's the thing so if I'm listening to XM Radio and Earthquake on the Kevin Hart channel, and Earthquake is basically saying that Black Twitter is saying that Kanye West is a joke, that might be a clue of how the African American community thinks about Kanye West right now. So I don't think that's going to sway many people. I think Kanye, it's a publicity stunt. I don't think he's got much credibility in anywhere.
You will, by the way, have also missed 5 filing deadlines, even if he decides to run right now.
Right. It's not serious, because if it was serious, he would. I mean, the filing deadline's already passed for a lot of these states. So, I'm not giving that any credibility at all.
Now, in the 2018 midterm elections, Republicans got destroyed everywhere. However, while they lost by enormous margins in formerly rock-red suburbs like in Northern Virginia, in Fort Bend County, Texas, even in Utah, which is Mormon and is always Republican, they made gains not just in rural areas like you'd expect them to, where in, for example, 2 districts in Minnesota, but they also made gains in some urban areas. Now, that wouldn't show up because they went from 90-10 to 85-15, but they also made some gains in urban areas along the margins. Do you think that's a temporary thing? Do you think that was the effect of low voter turnout? What do you make of that?
Well, I think it depends on who happens to be in office, and what's again. It goes back to the seeds, right? And unfortunately, it goes to fear. This, even though 2020 kind of taking its stuff to the next level, we were starting this trend the last probably 3 years of the Obama administration, right? As far as people being, for a variety of reasons, being disillusioned. And I think different segments were being disillusioned at different times. African Americans, we started getting disillusioned maybe in Obama's second term. Maybe he didn't do enough. He wasn't black enough. He didn't push civil rights as far as he should have. So I think there was that, and that kind of led into the Freddie Gray situation in Baltimore, right? As far as women, it was when Donald Trump was running, right? Can't believe this guy's going to be nominated. The whole Billy Bush stuff. In 2007, right after he gets inaugurated, the hashtag Me Too launches, and that goes for a year or so. That's hot, right? Everybody's being accused, and Epstein gets thrown in. He gets thrown away. Bill Cosby gets sent to jail. All this stuff happens, but then that kind of falls apart, right? In the last, let's say, 18 months or so. 17, 18, Me Too was the thing, right? 19, 20, haven't heard about it. Why? Because now there's other stuff. Now it's Black Lives Matter. Now we're struggling with the coronavirus. So you had African Americans, they do their thing, get disillusioned. Now it's back. But I think that we're so divided. We're so divided as a country. And unfortunately, people react in fear. And then on top of it, the media kind of fans that, and then politicians take advantage of it for their own purposes. But I was reading somewhere that I think it was 1 John 4:18, talk about basically perfect love cast out fear. And I think we've forgotten how to, first of all, be Americans. And second, that we're supposed to care about each other. That we're not supposed to have all the dividing things doing this, right? Because then we forget about caring about our fellow man. You know, you said you're more than one, so I want to throw out what letter you are. So I just said more than one. But here's my point, Tad. I shouldn't use government to try to tell you how to live. Government should be in place to help you live as best you can, right? To provide the resources that, public schools, infrastructure, public safety, so we can live our best lives. I don't care if you're gay or straight. I don't care. That's you. I have my daughter. I know who I am. You know who you are. Let's just take care of each other. And I think as Americans, we've forgotten about that. It's about us versus them, and whether someone's getting over on us, or whether they have more rights and liberties than we do. Well, if we're all Americans, we should have the same rights and liberties. We should. But that's not the way it works out, because it's about this, right?
It's about subtraction and not addition.
Yeah. And so I think that's where those different demographics are coming out, because at different points in time, different people want to express themselves to then get what they can get. Whether it's white or whether they
want their slice of the pie before it vanishes.
Right. Whether it's about sex or gender or age or race or whatever that is, instead of being Americans, we're that first.
So I was this is a different topic, but back to earlier. In 2018, Republicans got shellacked pretty much everywhere, but there were a few bright spots. Firstly, in Florida, Senator Rick Scott snuck out a victory by advocating very hard, by pushing very hard with the Latino community, especially Cubans, but also Venezuelans, also Nicaraguans, also Bolivians, a lot of Latinos who have been fleeing socialism. And since I'm going to try and keep this apolitical, obviously you're a Republican, I am too, so we can't avoid it. But I'm going to try and keep this rather non-biased. His messaging was that, true or not, I lean towards the true side. Other people may disagree. That Democrats and Bill Nelson were pushing for socialism in America. Mm-hmm. I generally believe that's true. Other people disagree. That's fine. We're not going to discuss that. But that was his messaging, and it worked. He ran Spanish language ads. He appeared on Spanish TV. He had a Spanish website. He had interpreters. And his opponent, Bill Nelson, didn't do any of that. And he won because of keeping the margins down among Latinos in the South. Right. Similarly, Governor Rick Scott won his race with a slightly different coalition with African Americans. His push for school choice gave him 18% of the black woman vote. 18%. And that, quite literally, was the difference between victory and defeat. So the Republicans that won, they appealed to minorities. They made messages. They're saying, we will help you, and we also won't take away from you. We're going to help the person on the left, but we're not going to hurt the person on the right to do so. Republicans in other states didn't do that message, and they lost. So it's obvious that we need to do this going forward.
Right.
But there's a pretty big authenticity problem, because, as you said, for the past few decades, we haven't been doing any of that. How would you suggest we get our ground? So you believe, and as we've learned, that we firmly need to plant the seeds. How do you believe that we plant them in the first place? How do we get our message through in those communities? How do we even just get people running? Even if they're going to lose, how do we get that Larry Hogan who wins 26% to set up Kim Classic? How do we get that very first person? How do we flip the dog?
Well, in Maryland, we're already doing it because we're encouraging people to run, and we're being real with them. But we're also being encouraging. So I think that you have to have both sides of it, because I've seen so many people who run for office and then they disappear. they get so discouraged and disillusioned because they get crushed. They think they have a chance, and then they don't show up anymore, right? And then I know somebody in Dundalk who ran for delegate 4 times, 16 years he put into his life, lost the first 3 and won the 4th time, right? Because, even at that level of the game, it's about people knowing your name. And
for my friends on election Twitter, I'm going to cut you off for a quick second and say, while we're talking about eternal losers, let me mention Jim Oberweis, let me mention Danny Tarkanian, let me mention that one guy in Washington who got stolen. Dan, 2004 Washington Senate. There's a bunch of people that we on election Twitter love to joke about because they always lose. Now back to you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that out there.
But I think so I'm going to say this. There are perennial candidates who are a joke, right? They don't have a clue. They run some off-the-wall campaign. They're just in it to kind of put their name out there, maybe even talk about a couple issues that are important, but they have no clue about how to do it, right? So there's those candidates. I'm not talking about those folks. I mean, they exist in Maryland. Okay, so I'm not going to name names, but there's somebody. Okay, all right. So they do exist, but I'm talking. So this guy in Dundalk ran 4 times. The 4th time he ran, not only did he win, but he brought 3 other people with him. It was a swing. I mean, they won the whole district. They won 3 delegate seats, a state senate seat, and a county council seat. In Dundalk, that was Democrat since forever. Okay? Now,
near Aberdeen, right?
What's that?
Dundalk is near Aberdeen, right?
No, that's Dundalk in Baltimore County. District 6, Legislative 6. So,
sorry, it's just hard for me to place with names. I need districts.
Yeah. So, I guess what I'm saying is that if you have a plan and you know what you're running about, and you have a message, he stayed consistent with his message. You only talked about education and public safety, which are things that they didn't go anywhere. There are always issues. Every 4 years, they're the top two or the 3, whatever they are. I mean, they're always right there. So he kept his simple. He kept his message simple. He repeated it. He repeated it for 12 freaking years, and he finally won. So that's persistence. Now, what we need are candidates that want to do something like that, not skip around from run for county, city council to delegate to something else. Now, if you happen to do the same thing, if you run for different things in the same geographic area that people get to know your name ID, then that may work out, right? But going from here to Congress to U.S. Senate to blah blah blah, we have those people all the time. But I guess what I'm saying here is that not only do we need to plant the seed, but we need to give wise counsel to candidates who are running for the first time. What can you expect? What resources are there that you should count on? And also give them the real world. Look, if you're in an 80-20 district, we might help you out a little bit. Don't expect to have the Republican Party riding on a white horse trying to save you, because that ain't going to happen, right? Because we've got 8 or 10 other districts that we are targeting that we're within 5 points, we're within 7 points that we want to try to win. But we're not going to leave you on an island by yourself either. We're going to do the things that we can do to help get your name out there. If it means, putting together volunteer days that people can come down and do door knocking. Door knocking doesn't cost anything. But if we can get 20 volunteers to be in your district for a couple of days, that'll help you get your name out. And maybe it's not a 4-year. It's not. You don't run and you don't file your name in March and get elected in November. Maybe you file this cycle, you run next cycle, and then maybe in your 8th year of running, being in the community consistently, then you can turn that key. Then you can win an election. Or maybe hell, you get 40% and you're a star, right? Because you get 40% in Baltimore City, you're the second coming, right? So we have to be realistic.
Hopefully metaphorically. I'm not ready for the end times.
No. Yeah, metaphor. But you're hoping that you see what I'm talking about here. I mean, we have to be real with people, but we also have to give them a goal to hit, right? It's not going to happen right away. Don't think it's going to happen right away. But if you put time in and if you're really about the community, then what's 8 years? Really, what's 8 years? If you're really about the community, you really want to serve, you really want to make a difference, then running once, running twice, doing the same thing with the same message, talking to the same people, being real, being consistent, and actually having credibility, that gets you from 20% to 40%, you know? But we don't do that. We first of all, we treat Candace as being disposable. Thanks for running. You know, yeah, we know we're running in Baltimore City. You know, thank you for your sacrifice. You know, we're not real with people. And then
how do you feel like your campaign was treated by the state GOP in 2018?
Not as well as I'd hope, you know, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, I knew going in, I tell candidates all the time that don't expect anything from the state party. And I didn't expect anything from the state party. I had people within the state party that did a lot of stuff. I mean, individuals that you know, bent over backwards for me. But I knew that the first priority was getting the governor reelected. You know, after that, it was the delegate seats and the Senate seats that they wanted to win, and quite frankly, we didn't win any of them. We got shellacked across the state. Drive for 5, goal for 6, whatever that was. We did none of that. We lost seats in 2018. So obviously that plan didn't work, and so again, I think it. But I saw what I was doing as different. I mean, I didn't have any delusions running and going into it that I was going to, you know, get 22 points out of nowhere and I was going to beat Ben Cardin. But
nobody beats Ben Cardin. I don't think he's ever lost a race.
But I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I made it was respectable. I talked about issues that I cared about, and how, I mean, and I still have to look back at the debate. It's like I survived a live debate. You know,
he's a career politician. He's been in office in some way for 40 years.
Yeah,
you did great. That was a great debate. I don't remember anything about it because it was 2 years ago, but I remember I loved it.
Yeah. So you know, it is what you get out of it. You know, I have friends across the state that will be there, you know, forever. I had never driven across Maryland as much as I drove across Maryland. You know, so I enjoyed the process. I wouldn't change it for a world, you know, but I was glad on election night that it was over. I was glad in February 2019 when all that craziness was going down in D.C. about the impeachment and everything else, that I wasn't down there for that mess. You know, I was happy about, you know, get my life back, you know, spend more time with my little girl and just, you know, just enjoy life, man, you know. So, you know, I hope, so I do want to close this up. Hopefully, maybe you have one more question, but the thing you said to me earlier is very important. I'm honored that you were engaged and you were involved in the campaign and you were inspired to not only do this but to get involved in politics, because you know we need people that are going to be able to think for themselves. You know, the thing I tell my students that I don't want you to be sheeple. We don't have to agree, but think, damn it, think for yourself. You know, if we agree, great. If we don't agree, this is America. You know, we put on our slacks, you know, on our top on ourselves, and we deal with it. you know. But not thinking, not just reacting, just being emotional, just all that stuff. It's just spiraling out of control, you know.
How
So,
would you say you talked quite a bit about about the importance of helping people, of funding them, of being honest with them. How are you going to get first-time candidates to run in the first place? What steps do you think need to be made for that? Not just like helping people when they run, but about getting people to run in the first place.
well, I think we just need to provide the opportunity. We need to say that whatever so if I'm talking to someone who looks like me, the thing I'll say is that if you are interested in making a change, don't discount the Republican Party. What you hear is not the truth. Because there are racists and bigots and ist in both parties, and in the independent group. They're all those, because we're human beings. That's what it is. That's who we are sometimes. But as far as a party is concerned, the ideology of the Republican Party is more for liberty, freedom, and equality than the Democrat Party is. It's always been that way. And don't discount being a part of it. Yeah, there's struggles. I'm the second vice chair of the state party, and and look, I tell you that I'm still struggling. There's still things that I don't like. There's still people in their idiosyncrasies and their vengeful ways that I don't like at all. But and it's happened in a few months ago, right? I'm not going to get into details about it, but it was something that shouldn't have been done. It was something that was wrong. It was unethical. It was wrong. And I'm still
talking about the Baltimore mayors.
And I'm still working for a state party, and I'm still running the state fair, the state fair booth, because
I'll see you when I show up again. If it happens, I'll see you. Then.
But because the Republican Party is where I choose to align. The ideals of the Republican Party is what I believe is right for this country, and so I'm not going to let anybody and their little stuff get in the way of me promoting the ideals of the Republican Party. I don't roll like that. People can do their thing, and I'm going to still promote the GOP as being the party that's about America.
So it's about time to wrap up. So I have a couple of things to say, but I'll give you one last question.
I'm done.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd expressly like to make a mention? Any closing remarks? Anything you think is important that I forgot to cover? Perhaps just spend like 90 seconds saying what you think needs to be heard.
No, I'm good. I appreciate the time. I appreciate your reaching out, Tad. Meeting people like you in the campaign. I had 4 guys who really worked hard in the campaign that were sort of like my deputy campaign managers, kind of thought. One's working at the Supreme Court. Another one's working on Capitol Hill. And that one's I think he's a lobbyist for the Air Force Sergeants Administration or something like that. Smart, fantastic young men, and they're launching off in politics, and I think you're going to do the same thing. So it's great to be with you.
So as it's about time to wrap up, I'm just going to say to Elections Daily, thanks so much for letting me do the stream for the past month and a bit. And I feel sad to be leaving, but things are what they are. And thanks again for helping me sit out independently. To the viewers, I'm glad y'all enjoyed my content, have been coming back for more. I really enjoyed the streams. I really enjoyed my chats with Eric. I enjoyed my solo stream. I enjoyed talking to Professor Campbell here. To Professor Campbell, thank you so much for coming. You are my first and only interviewer, but hopefully you won't be my last as I move independent and start getting to mostly control my own content. Finally, my Dino and Rhino, to my stuffed animals, especially Walter, who have been here for the entire stream, every stream. You guys are adorable. Mwah. I love you all. And for one last time, this is Rosex Maps signing off. Thank you so much, Professor Campbell, and I guess we'll see you later.
Okay, thanks.